All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Fear Itself podcast, where we talk about our fears and have some beers.
Oh, that's good.
I've been thinking about that all
I
week.
was going to say, what time did you go to bed? That's really
Midnight, deep into the night.
Wow.
I mean, long after the Blob finished, so... It was a good movie, and we watched the wrong ones, which is lending itself to a good episode.
Yeah.
So we're talking about two Blobs today.
Two Blobs.
The original, and then the one that I watched that was from the 80s.
The remake, I guess.
The remake,
the newest remake. Or, wait, this is the 1988 one or 1987 one, is that the most current Blob, or was there another Blob?
To my knowledge, that's the most current.
It's the most current. So I'm surprised they actually haven't remade this one yet.
Yeah,
if that's not the case.
I mean, it's hard to keep track of remakes in horror movies, and honestly, I'm sitting here haven't Googled the film at all.
Sure,
I'm sitting here without the cast's names in my head either.
Of course, yeah.
Unfortunately, but we're gonna just talk about these more conceptually and how they differ, because I think that's where it's gonna. That's where it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, well, the only main one from mine, because the one I watched, obviously the original, was from 1957.
Okay.
Or 1955, 1957. Now I'm forgetting the specific date, but late 50s.
Yeah.
And the only name that's really probably recognized, I would say, out of that group was the main character, the main actor, Steve McQueen.
Oh.
Yeah.
Steve McQueen's in it?
Steve McQueen's in it.
Damn.
Steve McQueen is the lead person. Yeah. So he's the one who figures out there's a blob. But yes, you're right. Let's talk about how these are more conceptual.
Yeah. So like when you're watching that one, because this is around a specific time in horror where you get a lot of things from outer space type of movies.
Yeah.
And so there's like that. I think there's that, not a fear or anything like that, but there's sort of that sci-fi genre that's emerging in horror.
Sure.
You have a lot of the tensions now starting to boil between Russia and the United States.
Oh, okay.
So, like, I think that there's some things to be said about the political atmosphere in horror.
Did you find that one was prominent in your
Yes.
film? Okay.
Yeah.
That's funny because
in a different way, though.
In a different way, because I actually didn't really find that in this one.
Okay.
Yeah. So the only real reference you get of war is that the main character is pleading to like the police later in the film. Pleading to the police to try and like believe him about what's going on with like something weird is going on with weird creature. He doesn't know what it is.
Yeah.
And tell you the truth, I don't even think the word blob is ever actually said in the movie.
Yeah.
They never actually named the creature itself. But in any case, the police, there's one in particular who has kind of a reputation for being kind of a hard ass. And he's the one that always talks about the fact that he has a war record.
Okay.
So he was in the military. And so I'm guessing, obviously, because this is the 50s, it must be World War II.
Yeah.
And he's a police officer
or
now.
Korea.
Or Korea? When was that one? Wasn't that in the 60s?
The Korean War?
Wasn't that?
That's Vietnam.
Oh, okay. The Korean War then was...
This is the Forgotten War. It's the one that's in between World War II and
World War One
and Vietnam.
Or in Vietnam.
Yeah.
Okay, so what... Yeah, okay, so what
Vietnam would have... Or Korea would have been the 50s.
Okay, so it could have been that one then. Okay, fair enough. So whatever the case, but he's the only one that's ever mentioned of that, and he blames that the kids in the neighborhood, like the teenagers, are all a bunch of like rascals who keep on like bothering him simply because they're trying to antagonize him because he has a war record. He takes it upon himself. It's very like personal to him.
Okay.
Other than that, though.
But see, like that's kind of what I mean about like the political times. Like maybe not political necessarily as country A to country B.
Sure.
But in this context, there's that feel in the 50s of the, you know, like the motorcycle gangs and, you know, there's that rebellious teenage feel that's going on where you have that old generation conflicting with the new generation.
Ah, that's fair. Yeah. It's an interesting thing because this movie, I would say, like, compared to what you probably watched, because I haven't seen your Blob, I would say that this was very, very tame, even for this kind of film. Like, it's clearly a horror film.
Yeah.
But it starts off with like there's a musical intro.
Oh, damn.
And it starts with
a
like
musical intro.
It's a musical intro. And it starts with like, watch out for the blob. The blob will come and get you. Like, I kid you not. There is an actual musical intro to the beginning of this, and it has like the opening credits is a musical
I gotta cut this into this.
You might have to.
That's an audio
it's
must.
such a strange. I was like, I must be watching
watching
the same
the right
thing
fucking
because
movie.
it says it's that's the only time the blob is mentioned in this movie is in the opening
song.
credits song. Yeah. So in any case, it goes to this, and then but we do get like the stereotypical like, you know, two teenagers in their car in the middle of the night looking at the stars, like very romantic kind of setting or whatever. Like very very staple of what horror was for that too. But in terms of like how everything is done, it's very it's very tame for the story. In fact, I would even say this Blob, my Blob, has multiple scenes in it that don't have anything to do with the movie. They could be cut out and nothing changes.
Interesting.
Several scenes.
Was it good?
So the movie itself is good. It's fine. Like it's well shot for the times, obviously. Well shot. The graphics of the actual Blob are, pretty good for what they did. I think they did stop motion animation. For it, or stop motion capture. There are some scenes that are a little like creepy or whatever. Acting can be better in some regard, especially the child actor.
Well, I think like the language of film changed so much too, and just how people were meant to act. Exactly. So when you get back into the 50s and stuff, you're going into a different time.
Yeah, well, like you have a scene where like, oh my god, like 20 people are now dead, and you have the firefighters saying like, what do we do now? What do we do?
Just deadpan.
Just very deadpan. Like, oh, did you need us for something? Like police op, like that kind of thing. Other than that, it's like it's not horrible. It's just of the time, product of the time. But there are scenes that could definitely be removed. I could think of at least 3, and then you're good to go. This movie is only an hour and 20 minutes.
Okay, that's pretty tight.
Yep. Could be maybe an hour and 10.
Okay, so cut a few scenes out, make it a little bit shorter.
Absolutely.
And then it's a pretty good film.
Yeah, absolutely. How about yourself? So with your Blob.
Okay, so
what do you? Because I think yours is an hour and 30, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, I gotta quickly check. Like I'm gonna pull this up
because I almost started watching yours.
It's good. Yeah. It was a great movie. I really liked it.
You really enjoyed it. Okay, so I do want to watch your Blob.
Well, what was great about it, and I would liken it a lot to The Thing. And
that's right. Okay.
And I think that people, do obviously give it that because of the practical effects in it.
Sure.
So what they choose to, I'm just trying to pull up the time here. I'm delaying. 1988. There we go. That's all I want.
1988. Yeah.
Yeah. So 1988. So comparisons to The Thing would be apt, and I think that there's the practical effects and the gore in it are they're very similar, and even like the way the Blob looks. It's definitely practical. They use they must use some different types of matte paintings and different things to sort of create the effect and the illusion of the size of it.
Sure.
And how it moves and everything.
And definitely an 80s product, you would say. Right?
Yeah,
especially
definitely.
with like The Thing and
you could
slasher
place it
films, right? Yeah.
If you see it, you could place it.
Sure.
It's funny, they make fun of slasher films in it too. And so because there's this one scene where 2 boys kind of sneak out. They each tell their parents they're staying at each other's house.
Smart.
They go and watch, what was it, like Garden Tool Massacre 5 or something like that. And so it's just hilarious.
Okay.
And they're even like sitting at the dinner table trying to convince their parents that they can go and see it. And he's like, yeah, there's no nudity in it. Just basic slice and dice them,
That is pretty good.
So it's a self-aware film.
I was gonna say, so yours actually has a bit of humor in it too.
Yeah. Definitely.
Okay. So mine does too, but it's like a 1950s type of humor.
Okay. So it's a little bit more slapstick.
I wouldn't even say slapstick. It's just kind of this weird little side, just a side reference to something or a side slight at somebody's expense or something.
Right.
But it's supposed to be humorous in like a time when it's probably not very funny. like they're running away from said Blob, and somebody will crack a joke about something. There's like one character who's clearly the funny guy.
Do they have like the 50s voice, like, the Blob seems to be after us,
No, unfortunately.
No, we don't get radio
we don't have
voice.
No.
They
do have people enough. Exactly. They do have somebody on the radio, but they don't have them speaking this way. Actually, that's another thing too, is the technology, right? So in the 80s, I'll ask you this because obviously this is also before cell phones.
Yeah.
We're both in the timeline. We still don't have any cell phones.
The best part is just watching people get into phone booths in this movie, I swear.
Right!
Yeah, you're like, yeah!
So a couple of
things.
Fucking
emergency.
Right.
Gotta get in the phone booth.
Gotta get a phone booth, call the police. It's like, here's a dime. It's like,
and mine is a quarter. It's like inflation.
I got 80 cents for a movie. What'd you get?
Oh, Jesus, I don't even
know
how much
the kids have to pay.
No, he snuck in because his cousin brought him in there.
Well, they got it in for free.
Yeah.
These good kids had to go in for 80 cents a piece.
Oh, shit.
And they got it.
See, now that pisses me off a little bit because there's no way it's like, what are we at, 1,000% inflation for movies?
Don't even. Oh, well, let's say here Canadian.
Then it's like 2,000%.
Yeah, if you want to go Canadian, we're talking maybe $15 for a typical, not typical AVX. No, that's typical now. 18 for AVX. So yeah, we'll say $14.
And may God have mercy on your soul if you order a Coke.
Oh yeah,
you're going broke.
If you're going by yourself and you want drink and food, you're looking at probably $25 now. We'll say, versus that 80 cents for the actual ticket. They didn't have any food, but
good time to be alone.
Go back to the 1950s. Yeah, nothing was wrong in the 1950s.
Nothing at all. Well, I think so the concept of the Blob, and I'm curious to see what it was in the original one, is where it came from, right?
Yeah,
so,
please tell me. Yeah.
So I'm gonna break mine down a little bit here, because 1988.
Because you and I, just to reiterate, you and I have never seen the other person's movie. Okay.
So we're on the opposite sides of the looking glass.
I love this. Yes, it's really good.
So mine is more of what you would expect from sort of like a Back to the Future sort of small town setup. And so you have like the sheriffs in it as well.
Yep.
You have the sheriff. You have sort of the fanatical priest as a character. So you have like a lot of these typecast characters. You have the football jock. You have the cheerleader. You have the punk, the no good punk, who's on his motorcycle.
Punk. Sure.
You have the town hobo, and then you have the diner.
When is this movie set exactly? Like it's made in the 80s, but when is it set?
I think it's gotta be. Oh, you know what? It's hard to say because I could see it sort of being anywhere between the late 60s and the 80s. I kind of feel it's the 80s though because the hairstyles.
Ah, okay, that's probably true.
Yeah, because I don't think they tried to do a period piece with it.
Okay. Well, because I'm thinking
they played it pretty straight.
They did. Hey, okay, so it's probably 80s, but it's in a small town, so they still have all this stuff. Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
Because everybody's got a mullet. They got and like the guy with the leather jacket. He's got a super mullet.
Okay.
It's excellent.
I think 80s was also big for leather. You're right.
Stranger's Thing did a really good job. Like he's got Steve hair.
Yes.
Straight up Steve
hair.
There
you go. Yeah.
And
okay. And that is set in the 80s, so it would make sense. Okay, fair enough.
And it's set up really well. And you don't the problem is with the Blob is you actually like all of the characters.
Sure.
It's not like the 2000s where where there was the kind of humor where the characters are making fun of each other and it's banter, but they're really just giant assholes.
They're really not real friends.
Yeah, these aren't real people. These are fucking dicks.
These are assholes.
And so, but in this, you actually like all the characters. They have good rapport.
Sure.
And so, and they have like more depth to their relationships too, because you have the football jock and the cheerleader in the beginning, and it sort of sets off where a meteorite lands in the woods.
Okay.
And you have guy in the motorcycle jacket goes to check it out, and the first person to actually find it and get attacked by the Blob is the hobo, and he's like really nice guy because like the
interesting
the guy's like trying to jump over a bridge with his motorcycle and doesn't make it, but the hobo's just like he's cheering him on, and like they seem to have like a little bit of rapport.
Sure.
And then he goes and finds the Blob and sticks his stick into the meteorite.
Yeah.
And then the Blob comes out and gets on his hand.
Okay, interesting.
Okay, what happens?
Okay, cool. So I just want to say yours I think identifies a lot better with the characters in terms of like how it goes. So Blob, original Blob, 1950s Blob, very very similar in regard. Aside from like you don't have the musical intro unfortunately, but we had a really long credits intro. Okay,
we had a really long 80s credit intro.
Okay, but you didn't. Oh, okay, sure. But you didn't have like here comes the Blob, watch out for the. You didn't have that. Okay, so
I could see Seth MacFarlane pulling that off.
Oh, probably. I have a deeper voice. I'm not singing it. It's like watch out for the Blob. That's a little Blob. Like it's a lot lighter or whatever. But in any case.
I want to hear your version.
Sure. I'll make a vocalized version of this and actually sing it on camera.
You'll be the outro today.
That'd be hilarious. I have to get the lyrics, but so you have your this one starts off. So you were talking about how like you have these I don't want to say stereotypical ones, but like the typecast versions of these characters, right? So we have our two typecast ones are like the typical couple, like girl and boy, teenagers, high school kind of sweethearts, but they're going on a date. And the boy, who's played by Steve McQueen, and he and this girl, and they're sitting in his car, and they're looking up at the stars in the romantic area in the middle of the forest or whatever, right? So their conversation revolves around. She thinks that he's like the suave one. You want to talk like the rebel one kind of thing, but he's still a good guy. We'll say. Like nobody's bad in this movie.
Okay.
I'm just gonna lay that out right now. Nobody has like any ulterior motives. So McQueen's character is basically just like, no, girl, like I'm a good person. I don't bring every girl up here, kind of thing, right? He's just being smooth, and he just wants to be a gentleman, kind of thing. So whatever the case,
is he lying?
I would think so, but who knows? In any case, same thing though. You have meteorite comes down, lands down there, and then it crash lands somewhere in there, and he sees it, and they both see it, and he's like, oh, that landed pretty close. I'm gonna go find that meteor and like just see what it is, right? Kind of in the middle of their date, but she's kind of into it. She's like, okay, sure, let's go, whatever. And so they do this. It cuts to, we don't have a hobo. We just have some old guy. He has a cabin in the woods.
Okay.
Which is another staple of horror, I guess. But he lives there with his dog. But he must have heard it, so he leaves his room and he has like this thing, and he, with a stick, pokes the blob rock.
We got stick and poke and blob.
Yeah. So he runs up on the stick, and then he's like trying to figure out what it is, and then it gets onto his hand. And then it's not until the other two teenagers are driving around, and they happen to, like, he runs across the road, and they find him, and he's like begging for a doctor. So they take him to said doctor in their small town. So that's where we start off.
Oh, damn. So we got like some similarities here, which
I feel like there's some influence here. Yep.
Now here's where I think the cultural bifurcation happens, because I think that Blob 1988 has actually a point to make about what it's making, and I think that at this point America's starting to lose a little faith in itself.
Okay.
Because I think the characters are representative of that. Okay. So like I think there's a Texas Chainsaw Massacre 1970 really changed horror in the fact that I think it was an iconic film, and that the United States was starting to, when you have the original kind of movies, there was always America was the hero.
That's right.
Now,
actually, that's fair. Yeah.
Now,
or authority is some kind of hero. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Now there's like characters and the typecast ones in the Blob and movies like the Blob.
Yeah.
You start to have these typecast or these archetypes emerging, where you have sort of like the villainous this and the villainous that. You have the priest who's corrupt.
Oh,
or you have
is the priest corrupt in the Blob? Your Blob?
Well, he's a bit of a psychopath for sure.
Oh, interesting.
Well, you also have what's interesting about it too is you have the football player who's with this cheerleader, and he's taking her out on a date, and they're the ones who encounter the Blob in the beginning, or they encounter the guy who gets the stuff on his head.
So very similar. Okay, yeah.
But before that, you have the punk and the police kind of having their standoff at the beginning.
Sure.
And it's interesting because he's the one who actually finds the guy with the Blob on his hand. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. So guy in the leather jacket, punk, finds the guy, and then and then the cheerleader and the jock are driving on their date to go somewhere.
Sure. And
he chases the guy onto the road while he's trying to like corral him to get to the hospital. He runs with his hand and he gets smoked by the car.
Oh.
And so the jock runs him over essentially.
Wow.
And that's what precipitates them having to go to the hospital together.
Ah, I see. I see. Okay.
So you have like that kind of contrast between.
Okay. Yours is much better.
Yeah, it's very much Stranger Things 2, because then you get like Steve and the older brother.
Yes, that.
I always forget his name.
What is that character's name? Yes, I do. Billy.
Yeah.
Billy.
It's very much like a Steve and Billy kind of.
Sure.
thing.
Yeah. Because he's top dogs trying to. Like,
yeah, because he's still Paul. I think is the jock and. The 1988 one. It's interesting, like they do get to the hospital, and so you have Brian Flagg, who's the main sort of he's not a villain, he's the anti-hero. I would say. So that's what I mean, where you start to have like these new things in horror movies. So it's kind of cool to look at this. House of Wax was actually like this too.
Okay.
Much worse movie.
Just gotta throw that out there.
Gotta throw that out. House of Wax is
not a great movie.
House of Wax is bad.
Sure.
But The Blob is actually really good.
Okay.
But it's one of those other remakes, right? Yes, where you have a much earlier remake, because you have like, what is it, Night in the House of, is it House of Wax?
It might be just House of Wax. Yeah, I think it's just the original House of Wax.
It's something. Yeah. There's a subtitle there.
Oh, okay.
Because I think because The Thing also has an earlier one, Thing from Another Planet.
Oh, that's right. Right, and they just changed it to The Thing. But then they have a newer one after the 80s thing or the 70s thing.
But that one is a prequel.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Gotcha. Okay.
So
okay, interesting. So yours has an interesting setup with like driving them to the hospital.
Yeah, you really know your set too. Like it's clearly a set too.
Right.
Like visually you're like, this is a set. But it's good. It's well done.
Good enough.
I'm happy with it.
Sure. So ours is like, so as I mentioned, you have like the doctor, sorry, not the doctor, the old man. They just call him the old man, or they call him old timer. Like he doesn't have a name, just old timer. Does this thing, and he's running on the street, and his hand is just being eaten by the blob kind of thing, right? And so they find him. And funny enough, Steve McQueen's character's name is also Steve. Right?
Oh.
His name is Steve Andrews.
Steve,
so it's easy to remember. Steve. Yeah, Steve playing as Steve. So Steve finds the old man on the side with this girl. His girlfriend's name is Jane.
Okay.
And so the two of them find him and then bring him up, and then they're like, okay, well, what's wrong? He's like, oh, my hand, you gotta take me to a doctor. And only Steve sees the hand. right? This is important because this is why it leads to people having issues with like believing him or whatever. Right, because Jane can't co-opt his story. So they put him into the back of his car and he drives off. And it's like 1950s convertible kind of thing. They drive off. And you get more reference to, or more introduction to like the doctor of the story. And so the doctor is like, it's a very small town, like everybody knows everybody kind of thing. Like they call the police by their first names kind of town, right? Like everybody believes everyone kind of thing. The doctor is like the town doctor. He's going away for a trip, and like once he leaves, there's no other doctor.
Right.
And it just so happens they catch him before he leaves his home. So they're able to bring the doctor, or the hobo, not hobo, sorry. That's yours. The old man in. Old timer. And they let, even the doctor calls him old timer. They're not even that far apart from age, but whatever.
Give the man a name.
Yeah. So they put him on the table and he's like kind of suffering, but they give him like a needle to let him relax. They put a blanket on top of him to relax him or whatever. And then he sees that his arm is continuing to do so. Okay. Now, the reason I think this is just to say that your story makes more sense in terms of like how the characters get brought together is so, as I mentioned, nobody in this town is bad.
Right.
Okay? I just want to lay that out there. Nobody is bad.
Nobody's bad. Everybody good. Everybody
has the purest of heart and nobody has any ulterior motives. Okay? We have this kid, Steve and his girlfriend trying to take this guy to a hospital. And they're in a rush. They honk a couple times, and they pass by this other car who happens to have 3 guys in it. At first, you think they're like bullies.
Okay.
They're his best friends. And so, as he does, but then they're like, "Who was that kid? Who was that guy?" He's like, "Oh, that's Steve Andrews. That's his car." He's like, "Oh, we can't have that." Like, and he's like racing or whatever. So, any case.
They're just like all these do-gooders.
Yeah. So they go.
In my movie, they're always like, "I'm fucking watching you, Flag. Right. I'm ready to bust your ass." They hate everybody,
right? Yeah. 30 years, man. 30-year difference. That's all it took. Yeah. So they have like the scene after the kids, because the doctor says like, "Okay, can you go back to where you found the old man? See if you can find out like anybody who can corroborate his story or like tell you what happened with him, because I don't recognize what this is." And so they're leaving, and this is actually one of the scenes could have been cut out of the film, and this would have been fine. But you have those 3 guys. They know him, and they know the girl he's with, and they're like teasing him and being like, "Yo, you're going too fast. You think you're so fast. You got to have a race now. We're challenging you. You got to have a race." This was actually in the movie. And he's like, "Okay, we'll race backwards." I don't know. Like I could explain. Like he makes a joke about him. Like my car could beat your car going backwards.
Okay.
And then he's like, "Okay, we'll race backwards." That's how that works. And so they do so.
Weird scene.
It's so random. And then it goes back.
Is this one of the scenes that could have been cut?
Absolutely. The only thing that this does.
No, Anthony. You got to have this backwards race.
The only thing that this does is it introduces a bunch of characters that really don't do much. But then you drive back, and then one of the cops, the good cop of the movie, sees them racing, and everybody knows him. So he's like, "Oh, hey, Dave, what was I doing?" He's like, "What were you doing?" And like they have this 20-minute, like it feels like 20 minutes, like 7-minute conversation about like, "You shouldn't be doing this. You shouldn't be doing this. Like, what are you doing outside the doctor's office?" He's like, "Oh, the doctor's office, right? I forgot I had to go." Like,
they just fucking forgot about this guy.
Like it's actually useless, and I'm like, okay,
it's a little bit Looney Tunes, isn't it?
It is. So, any case, finally, and then you're introduced to the cop, and you're introduced to these three other characters, and they talk like, "Oh, did Dave? His name is the police officer's name is Dave. They just call him Dave. Like, did Dave have any issue with you?" No, he's really good. Well, it's a good thing you didn't get Birdie. It's like, yeah, Birdie's like such a hard ass because he's like that old war veteran, like all this stuff. He's like, who the hell is Birdie? And you do meet Birdie. He's the asshole character, but that's about it.
Birdie.
Right. And you're like, that's it. And then he's like, "Oh, I got to go and, save that doctor's office, or save that doctor, save the patient in the doctor's office," kind of thing. So, and then he convinces, like, "Yo, come with me. We can go look for him." Like, they're his best friends.
Just hop into the mystery wagon. We're going.
You're led to believe, like, from a early 21st century person who's watched a ton of movies, and you've seen the 80s, and they're like all like everybody's an asshole. Yeah. Looking at a 50s wholesome group of people, and they're all like, "Oh, that's our friend. Let's go race him. Oh, our friend needs help. Let's go help him." Like, it's just so weird. For us, it's weird.
Yeah, no one in my film helps anyone. They're fucking out for themselves.
That's where we go back to the forest, and that's where they find like the egg thing with where the blob came from. So, in any case, that's where ours is going, and we've already seen a scene that literally didn't need to be there.
I love it. I like the backwards race.
It's so weird.
there's not much extra on this on 1988 because it's a 1.5 hour film.
That's right.
And
that must be quite tight.
It's a tight script, yeah. There's some really funny scenes for character building in it too.
Okay.
And like when I say funny, like this film, it's self-aware, it's good.
Sure, right.
And it's like, is it perfectly active? Is it a perfect movie? No, but it's really good for its time.
Sure.
And honestly, still for today, it's funny because there's after the football game, there's a football game in the beginning.
Sure.
And that's how he asks the cheerleader out. He gets like smashed after catching the ball, and then like asks her out when he's like losing consciousness. And then he goes to a drugstore with one of his buddies.
Sure.
And his buddy turns out to be one of the worst, literally the worst character in the film. So
really?
It's like popular guy and his friend, and his friend is like all into banging chicks, and like he's like that guy.
Sure.
And so he goes up to the register to buy condoms, and it's and then main character, or the not main character, good guy goes and like kind of hides by some magazines at the front while he goes to do this, and then he goes up to buy the condoms and talks to the pharmacist, and then right then like the priest comes up and starts talking to him, so it's just like excellent timing. But then the joke has like this double payoff too, because he comes back and it's like, do you want regular or ribbed? He just looks at him and goes, ribbed. They're my friend over there. And it turns out later on that the pharmacist is the father of the cheerleader. And so like he says like he gets to meet her later.
There's a joke in there. There's a joke made because of this.
It's so funny. He's like, "Can I just introduce my dad? It'll only take a couple seconds." And like they walk into the house together, and like he has the newspaper and he puts it down. And he just sees him. He's like, and he just says ribbed. And then it just like smash cuts to them driving. He's like, yeah, I've made better first impressions.
That's actually very good. That's like a comedy movie.
Oh yeah,
like that's great.
They had like in multiple
very good timing.
Tiers. Yeah, the timing of it was very excellent.
Was the director of this film like more so into comedies than to horror? I wonder.
Who was the director of this too? Like I just don't know anything about. We looked at the cast list. And like Jeffrey DeMunn, the sheriff is the one that I remember the most because I really like The Shawshank Redemption and The Green Mile.
Sure.
But yeah, I can't remember who actually directs this. Yeah.
Oh, that's a great. Well, have you ever heard that? There's a joke about that. Have you heard that joke before?
No.
It's about, so like, you know, I'll keep it close for everybody, but like basically a guy goes into a pharmacy. He asks the pharmacist, "Oh, hi, I need to get some condoms." And so he says, like, "Okay, here's a box." He's like, "Oh, you know what? My girlfriend's mom is actually quite attractive. Oh, no, sorry, my girlfriend's sister is also quite attractive too. You know, maybe I'll do that because like, the pharmacist is a male, so he's like playing around or whatever." And the pharmacist seems like, "Okay, sure, whatever." And then he's like, "You know what? No, my girlfriend's mom is quite attractive too. Maybe I'll get a third box." So he buys like 3 boxes of condoms, and he leaves. So later he's meeting up with his girlfriend, and they're gonna have dinner with the family. And he sits there and he's like, and they're saying grace or whatever, and she's like, "Why are you still saying grace?" And he says, "You didn't tell me your dad was the pharmacist."
Oh, so it's like a playoff of that joke.
That's exactly what it sounds like. As soon as it sounds like, that sounds very much like a joke.
Yeah, it is.
So
I wonder if it is that joke.
I wonder if somebody made that joke from that movie or whatever it was. So
I mean,
or the movie was from there.
Yeah.
Any case, there you go.
Funny.
So, but I love the ribbed.
Yeah,
that's pretty clever. I like that. Yeah. So.
Good self-aware humor.
Okay, yeah. Nowhere near my Blob, but definitely, yeah. Good jokes.
I don't get no theme song, but at least I get some jokes.
It's still funny. Yeah.
I really liked the practical effects and the gore in this, and I think that's I would say is like the highlight of this film is really the Blob itself. The Blob is it's a great blob.
Now, okay, let's talk about the Blob a bit. So like the actual Blob. Mm-hmm. My Blob in the film leaves no blood.
Mine leaves a lot of blood.
Yeah. So for the 50s, there's also, because this is 50s cinema regulation at the time.
Right, because you have, what was it,
so couples cannot sleep in the same bed.
And we have a Bert and Ernie situation.
We have a Bert and Ernie situation where we have like a couple, clearly a loving couple, with 2 separate beds in their bedroom. Like that's actually a thing. Because it's the 50s. Makes sense, right? A lot of movies, a lot of shows had this. No blood from the Blob whatsoever, and any killing is done off screen.
Right. One thing I don't know that much about is like the Hays Code. Mm-hmm. And we were talking a bit about this at the bar last week when we were talking about Freaks. Right. Because Freaks is like the 20s, I think. Something like that. Where
I think that's what made it changed it, or something.
I think that's what kind of made it get enforced,
right?
Because art was supposed to be sort of, you know, like self-regulatory, don't make the government step in kind of a thing.
Sure.
And I think Freaks kind of ruined
Definitely changed that.
I mean, like, didn't ruin it for everybody, just made people want to enforce it.
Right.
So then I think you get that in the 50s.
Well, exactly, and that's exactly it. So I think the 50s, this film exactly was playing it as safe as possible.
Right.
But it still registers as horror because it's clearly some alien creature that's devouring people, right, and growing.
Yeah.
But yeah, so where yours, you have all these things, like the things that you love about your Blob, are non-existent in mine.
Which is too bad. And even like it's a sort of an inversion of the original.
Yeah.
Because can I spoil what happens and where the Blob comes from?
Oh, so you actually know where yours comes from?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
It's the United States government that does it.
Oh, it's a secret project.
Because like they sent like a bacteria and they were like trying to grow it for like a weaponized program.
Right, and that is like the more famous version of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, mine actually comes from outer space.
Oh yeah, because that's where everything was just shit was coming from outer space.
Shit comes from outer space, and that's literally all that was. And because you don't blame anybody.
Well, I think people
don't blame anybody.
Finally were looking up again and like finding a lot of fear in, you know, things from another planet.
Yeah.
And we had talked a little bit about EC Comics and, you know, Stephen King and a lot of writers being influenced by that kind of that sort of sci-fi stuff that's starting to happen.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is outer space, like, you know, invaders from Mars and all of this
Mars
other
attacks
stuff.
And I mean,
there's all kinds of stuff.
Well, that or the supernatural.
Yeah.
Actually, so because you make mention of like they're playing on the slasher type of film, right? Because those kids are going to watch that, right? In mine, it's like a demonic, like not a vampire one, but actually kind of like a ghost, I would say. But it's like the kids in this movie for the 80 cents. A lot of them are watching like a demon that possesses people or something is attacking people in black and white, kind of older looking film. Yeah. So that's what they're playing on in this one, I guess, is like this strange creature from unknown things and nobody knows how to stop it. Like that's what they're playing off of.
In this one, it's a guy in a hockey mask with a hedge trimmer.
Which is honestly just funny.
Yeah.
Like it's just a comedic.
Though not funny if you've ever cut yourself with a hedge trimmer.
That's true. Those things would probably hurt. Yeah.
It cuts like little pyramids out of you. I don't even know how to describe it. My buddy cut his fucking leg like with a hedge trimmer, and it was just like, it cuts like really deep, kind of nasty, like like cube triangles. I don't know how to describe this.
Okay, no, I got you.
A pyramidal cube. It's like a D&D dice.
Okay, no, that's like I got you. So like a cube form, but has like the triangle.
So don't cut yourself with a hedge trimmer because it takes ages to heal. It gouges you.
Yeah,
it doesn't
hurt. Holy crap! Yeah. No, that's.
Now, could you actually kill somebody with one? It would take a minute.
It would, and that would probably be why this hedge trimmer murderer was probably, you know, so disliked.
And so inefficient. Yeah. He had one victim because it took him the whole time.
What a great joke film.
It is.
Yeah, that's actually pretty self-aware. I like that.
What does yours look like? What does the blob in yours kind of look like?
Yeah. So mine's actually similar to like what's behind me.
Okay.
So it's kind of that's first. That's why you said it, right? Yeah. At first, it's like a really weird, translucent, like white gooey thing until it starts to like start absorbing people.
Okay.
It becomes like I would say like a deep red sludge. Mm-hmm. That's about it. That's basically it. It's a deep red sludge and it moves around very slowly. Like I said, the animation for it, like for the time, basically stop motion or whatever they're doing for it, very, very well done.
Interesting.
It can go under under doors and through the
Yeah,
vents.
that's like the creepy aspect of it, right? It really can be anywhere.
So the thing, exactly that, and it's like it's indestructible. For the most part until like we'll talk about there. We'll talk about that. But it's indestructible. It eats everything that moves, basically, and it's super quiet.
Yeah.
Nobody knows it's coming until because it's slow, and it just doesn't
get on
make
the
it
roof
move.
And stuff.
Yeah. Like the one scene we have, like one of the other cannon fodder characters that just gets eaten. We don't even know his name, but he's like some asshole mechanic. Mind you, he's not an asshole. He's just a guy. He's like,
some guy.
Yeah, actually, he'd probably be the biggest asshole of the movie. He's just talking about like, oh man, my boss is mean to me, and I'm so tired. I just want to go with my buddies and have drinks all weekend and get totally like shit faced. Like that's literally his whole thing.
Isn't that just all of us now, Anthony?
Especially for mechanics. Okay. But his mechanic friend that he's telling this to is like, oh, I got to get home to my wife. No, sorry, I can't do that. He leaves
that's like a Simpsons moment. It's just like, I sleep in a race car. What do you sleep in?
I sleep in a big bed with my wife. He's like, So basically that. And he leaves, but the guy doesn't know he leaves, so he's still talking to him. And then the blob is like, finds him. And then you see his like legs sticking out there. And then it cuts.
Okay.
So that's basically what happens with the.
Do you see
Blob,
like the gore?
You see no gore. I promise you, no gore. The worst thing you see is that it. I mean, to kind of spoil this portion, I guess, but like when the doctor gets eaten, because the doctor's in the office with this, and they've locked the door because he doesn't want any more visitors coming in because it's late at night.
Right.
But Steve sees him through the window. This acting is not great, but he sees him through the window, and the doctor has it over his head, and then it just eats him up, but then it cuts.
Okay.
It cuts, and then you just see McQueen's face.
It's a lot of off-screen kill.
Yes, McQueen's face, but he looks like, oh. And then he like turns and just goes back to the car, and Jane's like, "Oh, what's wrong? What's going on?" He's like, "No, I just saw something that I just, and it's not very believable, honestly. You just saw like the town doctor just get eaten by some creature thing, and you're not freaking out. Yeah, it's a little strange.
I think that the characters in my film should have also lost their shit a little bit more.
Sure. I feel like, any giant blob thing that's going to eat people.
Well, so like they get the guy to the hospital, right?
Right,
So they got our hobo at the hospital, and they're waiting. Flag leaves because he's like, I don't want to be involved with this.
Right.
And so then
you
just
have be with the police again. Yeah.
You just have Paul and cheerleader.
The cheerleader, sure.
Which I looked up her name and now I've forgotten again.
Is what it is.
Shawnee Smith is the actress. Anyways.
Okay, that's fair. But call her Shawnee.
Yep, I'm just gonna call her Shawnee. Shawnee the cheerleader. Anyways, so you have them at the doctor's office, and then you see Paul kind of see what's something weird that's happening in the background of the doctor's office.
Okay.
You know who the biggest jerk in this entire movie was? It was the nurse.
Oh, it's the nurse. Oh, really? In mine, the nurse is like the nicest person. She comes back.
She's just like basically one of those people who's like. Who's a regular ass nurse who's just like, wait a sec, shut the fuck up and wait, and then just like takes the guy to the back and then asks them if they have like Blue Cross and like health insurance and shit.
30 years difference, man. My nurse, the doctor calls her and begs her to come back because he's like, I know it's late, but I need you to come back because I got a real strange patient right now. She comes back. He says, thank you for coming. She's like, oh, it's no problem at all. She's the second one killed after the old guy. She's the one. She's like, and she's the one that gets taken. He's like, he has a gun. He's like, what's wrong? What's wrong? And then he can't find her. That's, yeah. So, yeah, my nurse was like, just totally innocent. Yeah.
Well, he's in the back, and and the football player Paul starts to realize there's something messed up about him. He's like turning, and then he looks over at him. He's got like milky white eyes, and turns to get the doctor and get him to come back and help this guy.
Sure.
And then comes back in, and that's when you get like that's when you really get the blob. And the blob in this one, it's
this blob. Yeah.
This blob is
green
like
in this one.
No, he's red as well.
Also red.
Yeah, also red.
Interesting. Okay.
So they kept that.
Good.
And I like the color choice because it really stands out. It looks like a stomach.
Yes, like it doesn't like make a sound or anything. It just moves.
And this one has like veins almost in it and like tendrils because it can reach out and grab things and like, wrap around them and envelop them.
Right.
And, like catch
pulls
them.
You in. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's got all these little kind of side abilities too.
So that is what you're left to the imagination for in the 1950s one. That's exactly what you would think happens. It absorbs you this way, but you actually see it.
Yeah, and this one it absorbs you, and it holds the shots too, because this is where you get the practical gore.
Yeah.
So with Paul has the most unfortunate death of any character.
This is the
football player.
The football player, right?
And you're like, I wouldn't expect him to get killed.
Yeah,
so quick. And he's just like right away.
Wow.
He's getting iced.
Ooh.
And so he gets completely enveloped, and then Shawnee Smith comes back in, and it's like all over his face, and then like his arms, and he's like reaching out for her.
Yeah.
And she grabs a hold of his arm and pulls it off, and it's just like all of like the gaudy, because it's acidic.
Sure.
Essentially, it's a really powerful acid.
Decomposing them inside, right?
Yeah, so it's probably just digesting.
Just getting a mass
and getting big. Yeah. And I think it's like gets.
Oh, that sounds really good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think that's probably the most iconic shot in it. Honestly, is like him trapped in it, reaching out and like getting his face melted and everything.
Yeah.
And you see that happen to a few other people too, where it's just like the remnants of them just like as they're dissolving in it.
Jesus.
So it's like really, it's like quite gory,
right?
And but in like a really practical effects way. It's cool.
And that's in the hospital, right?
Yeah, in the hospital.
Ooh, so
and then they blame Flag for it because like Blob escapes, and then like there's like missing body parts, and they're like, it's probably fucking Flag
because Flag brought them in here, and of course he had to sign them in and everything.
Yeah.
Oh, I was gonna say as well. So is this also because it's happening in a hospital? Do a lot of people in the hospital get like taken or eaten and disappear because
like it was just him and like one other person because it's a small town.
Oh right, it's not a giant building, right? It's like a clinic or something. Yeah, because this is like an actual at least in mine, is like the doctor's home is his clinic.
Yeah.
The nearest hospital is another city over. So they have to, like, if it was a really, really big thing, he has to call another doctor to get his opinion. But the other doctor's already gone or something because it's late at night, right? Oh, that's incredible. Yeah. That's actually really, really good. It actually leads, like I said, like yours actually seems like the structure's
the setting more, is good. And you have like a lot of good changes of setting because then they're in the police station figuring it out and they're interrogating him. And and it's a good back and forth and you get a lot of your mother kind of like back and forth between him and the deputy. Oh, and they have to let him go because they have nothing on him.
Right. Okay.
And that's when you actually get the teaming up of Shawnee Smith and Flag. And
that's how they end up together, right?
Yes, exactly.
That's the thing. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, the rebel with the cheerleader kind of thing, right? That stereotype.
Classic maneuver.
Wouldn't actually happen, but it happens in all these movies, right? Okay. All right, let me bring you to mine then. So when we get to this, because speaking of police and everything, so you just had the first death on the stuff. Steve is gone there. He's seen that the doctor's been eaten, and he's like, okay, we got to get out of here. So he and Jane drive to the police station, and there's the 3 cops. One of them is unnecessary. He shouldn't even be in this movie. He plays chess.
No.
He's a smart kid, but just plays chess. Or a smart guy.
I like how to indicate intelligence. We get people playing chess.
That is a staple of it, and it should never change. I love that.
I play chess, and I'm dumb as fuck.
but people will think you're smart. That's the key.
Yeah,
that's the key.
It's all an illusion.
It's an illusion. So Jane and Steve enter the police station, right? And with all that, the 3 police officers are all there, and they explain like, okay, the doctor's dead. Straight up, the doctor is dead. The doctor's murdered or whatever. So, asshole cop, Officer Burt, says like, well, what's going on? Like, you really believe this, Dave? Because Dave is the head police officer. And Dave's like, well, listen, like, the kids aren't all bad, kind of thing, right? They're not all playing jokes. He's like, no, they're probably playing jokes on us or whatever. They're gonna make us look like idiots because we're gonna go to this police station. This is the argument. And Steve is clearly just saying, no, I'm not. I'm serious. Like, he could be acting a bit better, but he's literally just like, no, Dave, no. Like, doctor's dead. Doctor's dead. You gotta come see. You gotta come with me. And so they're like, okay, listen. He's saying the doctor's dead. By obligation, we need to go and investigate this, even if it is a practical joke. And so the 2 of them, they leave the other guy with the chessboard, and he has like this little scene which can be cut out where he's playing chess with the guy over the radio. I kid you not.
Jesus.
This is a thing.
What are these shots?
I don't know. I think it's to like pad the runtime or something. I don't know.
That's padding runtime.
It's crazy because this
you're
guy
driving backwards and playing chess on the radio.
This guy does not need to be in this film because even though he might be like the smart guy or he's like pretending to be the smart one or something, it never comes up in the film. It doesn't. He doesn't come up with the thing that kills this thing, right? So in any case, or stops this thing. So the 2 cops and Jane and Steve go back to the doctor's office. They go up to him. And like, oh, doors like locked or whatever. It's like, okay, let's try and, okay, hello, doctor, whatever. It tries to go through, and they find one locked room because the doctor had hid himself in this room because he was hiding from the blob. But of course, the blob is able to go under doors. So like, okay, this door is locked. Go around the window. Go around the back. He says to the other police officer, go around the back. Like either break the window or open the window, see if you can get in, then open the door on the other side for us. I'm gonna go get the switch for like the breakers went off or something for the lights, which also helps with like how the animation is for the scene, right?
Right.
Because that way they don't have to show like the blob in full light. It's just like a shadow, right?
Yeah, you got to hide some shit.
You got to hide some stuff like that, right? And that's all for animation nowadays. Does this too with graphics, right? So that's the key. So in any case, they both come back and they open the door, and it's like, things are all over the place, and it's there's a gun on the ground which has been fired. The Dave cop like, oh yeah, no, it's been fired at something, and it's a mess, and so. Burt cop says, oh, these kids probably just broke in, they locked the door on the other side and made it look like there was some kind of issue because how do we confirm that the doctor is dead? There's no body.
Right. There's
nothing here. And Steve's like, no, I saw him get eaten by some and I think he says the word like mass, like some mass takes him around. It never says blob, just says mass. It was in the window and he just saw this thing. And then I guess because this like house is owned by a few people, another woman comes down who's supposed to look after the doctor's office while he was away because he was leaving. Mm-hmm. She comes in and she's like, "Oh my god, like there was a mess. The kids came in." It's a super annoying character. She's useless. She is a useless character in this movie. I don't know why they have this scene, but basically she's trying to like touch stuff, and he's like, "No, we need it for evidence. We need it for evidence."
She's just like,
yeah, she's like, "Oh, I gotta clean for the doctor." And you're like, who is this?
Stop touching shit.
Why are you here? Like, it's
we're not even into fingerprints yet, but stop touching shit.
He actually says fingerprints. He's like, we might have to dust for fingerprints. Yeah. They actually use the line.
When did fingerprints become a thing? I'm not sure. It's got to be like 1900s.
40s or 30s. Yeah. Like, it's definitely a thing.
Because DNA is like not till the 80s.
Yeah. No, fingerprints, I think, was supposed to be something if they had it. Plus, it's a small town, so who could it have been, right? Yeah. Like I said, everybody knows everybody by their name, except this particular old woman does not know who Steve is. So they get introduced. Yay. But in any case...
Steve, grumpy old lady.
basically, he bows to her. It's like, hi. Like... Okay, like, this woman has nothing to do with the rest of the film.
Do you play radio chess?
Right. So,
do you drive backwards?
Yes. So, here we are. We're finished with this, and then they're like, okay, we got to go. It's like, okay, bring you back to the station, put a remark or put a statement down, and then they call their parents, right? So both their dads of each person, and Jane's dad is the typical like, you'll never see my daughter again type of person, right? He's like, how dare you do this? And then like Dave is like, he's like the best guy. He's just like, no, nothing's been proven yet. Like, don't blame Steve for this, like all this stuff, right? He's defending him. I kept thinking that Dave was like his dad or something. But he's not, because his dad shows up. He's just a good guy.
He's just Dave.
He's just a good guy, yeah.
A friendly cop,
or his older brother or something, but he has no relation to him whatsoever. At least not.
Boy, you don't get the cops. My cops are different.
Your cops are absolutely different, and this is what makes it so wholesome.
Yeah.
And then I'll finish this portion of it with mine, basically saying like they go home and they're supposed to have like a night's sleep, and then they sneak out later, Jane and Steve, to go and get their friends to go and try and figure out what happened to like the old man and everybody. So they're gonna go like back to his house. They're gonna solve this
mystery.
Basically,
Nancy Drew in it.
They're Nancy Drew in it or Scooby Doo in it, however you want to put it. Basically, that's what happens with mine. So
Nancy Drew and Scooby Doo is a good crossover.
I've heard of this before. I think didn't they also do the Hardy Boys or Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew?
That's a crossover that actually happened.
Yeah. Okay. Scooby Doo, I think, had Nancy Drew once, didn't they?
I hope so.
Scooby Dooby Nancy Drew. I don't know. Scooby Dooby Drew. Any case. What exactly happens with yours then? So you get to this point where they've brought him in.
Yeah.
Flag, right?
Yeah.
So they bring him in. He's talking with.
I kind of have to set a few things up because of what's happening here. So you have him in the police station. Yeah. Obviously, animosity between him and the police. The police aren't necessarily bad characters, but they're definitely like
they're definitely not nice.
There's animosity between them.
Even though they're in a small town, they still don't like. Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously he's done some things to get under his skin.
Sure, because he's that punk ass kid.
Kid.
Yeah. Who's never been that?
Yeah, who's never been that? Mm-hmm. And there's some really good allusions like that. Flag's actually a good character too. And,
sure he is. Yeah.
He's got friends at he's got like friends at like the mechanic shop who he's borrowing tools from and stuff. And so to fix his motorcycle, and they trust him with it, and he puts in work there.
Okay.
So and there's the scene at the police station, but the biggest scene I would say next is the one in the diner. So Fran's diner is where it all kind of goes down and things start to go off the hook.
I think mine's called Fran's Diner too.
Okay, cool.
Interesting. Okay.
Fran's a super nice character. I like Fran.
We never meet. Oh, no, we do meet Fran. Never mind. Okay. Mine's an Italian guy.
So like Fran is friends with Flag.
Oh, okay.
And so she lets him in to like come grab a sandwich after hours. Like they're closed, but lets him in and everything. And then she comes in, and like she has seen Paul get enveloped and dismantled by this blob. She like, and her parents try and give her like a pill to sleep it off at night because no one believes her. She's just like, underplaying it, where she's just like, I've seen some shit. And
she's the Steve.
She's the Steve.
She's the Steve. Okay, because she's the one that saw the actual event happen.
Correct.
Okay, interesting.
And so she's trying to convince Flag that she's seen this.
Okay.
And like they sort of like, it's kind of like an awkward dialogue, I would say, but it's very like of the time. So they kind of like bond over a sandwich in the diner after hours, but then the blob just cuts loose and starts icing people. And so and you start to get a little bit of some foreshadowing about how you defeat the blob too. Because it first it's in the sink, and somebody puts their hand in the carburetor and gets sucked into the sink. Don't put your hand in the sink. He was poking with a stick. Should have been fine. They had like a toilet plunger and they're trying to plunge it. And then eventually he's just like, and you like,
not gonna get it out.
It's like, it's good tension building because you know what's up.
So he gets pulled in.
Yeah, he gets sucked in, and he gets like gorily sucked into this.
So it's like dissolving him as he's getting more and
more.
No,
it sucks him in and like it basically like degloves him getting sucked into this drain.
Jesus.
And like later on, somebody also gets sucked through things. One of the deputies, the main deputy, he gets like grabbed in the middle and like broken backwards through. Like he's like bent over the wrong way and like pulled through something.
Oh Jesus!
So you have like really. Like,
those are gruesome
ones.
Yeah. Okay.
Then Fran gets iced too because she goes out to try and call the sheriffs. She gets in the phone booth. Phone booth death.
I think that's a key scene. I think that one's quite well known, right? Because phone booths in horror films have always been kind of
it's
like
iconic.
Also a staple.
Like what's the new phone book?
I know we don't have it anymore.
Just like on your
on your phone. Well, you're literally just like you're distracted by playing your game. I guess I don't know. But no, because like
just playing Candy Crush and get eaten by the blob.
There's like sitting at a bus stop. You're like. Right, that kind of thing. But like,
I guess we still have bus stops.
We definitely do, right? Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds also had like the infamous like trapped in the phone booth scene too, right?
And the movie Phone Booth.
I would hope there was a phone booth in the movie Phone Booth. But yes, phone booths are also a staple. It sucks about Fran.
Yeah.
But okay.
Yeah, she was there's a lot of great characters. You're like, I kind of thought you would have lasted longer. Like Paul, the jock. Yeah. You're like, oh, he's that kind of our main character.
Sure.
And then he's like the most gruesome death rate off the back. You're like, oh, we're going in a different direction.
Yes. Isn't that an interesting feeling, right?
Yeah.
When you have these characters, you're like, oh, okay, I wonder what's going to happen with this character.
It definitely subverts your expectations.
But not in a bad way.
No.
Not in a bad way.
And no one's safe in this.
No, and that's the point, right?
I have to tell you about one of the deaths. And you're like, oh, geez, I didn't expect that at all.
Jesus, that would be one good trope of a horror film. It's like maybe you shouldn't be able to guess who's going to survive at the end.
Yeah, you shouldn't.
Yeah.
Like honestly, like a lot of the 80s ones, you have your final girl. So you have like Nancy.
There are stereotypes for a reason.
Yeah. Right? Well, and like there's been essays written about it.
That's true.
And so it's a thing. Yeah, and there's a reason for that too. But...
And there's typically like the 5 types of character. I mean, Cabin in the Woods made fun of this, right?
Yeah.
With your jock, with your cheerleader, with your like nerd, with your rebel or whatever, and your virgin, whatever. Like you have all these characters, right?
Exactly. You have your Breakfast Club.
Right. Exactly. Your typical 5 or 4 characters that all have their different traits, and they're all put into a situation. Interesting. Okay, so whereas you had all these people who are kind of like, this is the difference, right? The main thing about these themes. Your cast and all those characters are brought together because even though they hate each other, they don't like each other, they're forced to work together because there is some kind of issue going on. And there's a massive problem.
You know what the problem is? The government.
Basically the government, but the government's problem or the product that they
the blob is really the big problem here.
Yes, but the government fact that they did this, right? Yes. Mine is everybody gets together because somebody asked them.
Oh, that's so nice.
That's literally what it is. So the scene, like I mentioned this before about, the movie theater, right? Or in the cinema, they paid their movie and they're watching the demonic, like ghost horror film, right? Actually they call it, what do they call it? Oh, it's a spooky showing. We're going to go to the spooky showing. I kid you not. It's like, that's so sad. Like it sounds
so, like, can we go see another spooky showing?
It's literally what they call it.
I'm going to call it that. I like this.
It's like, yo, oh my God. Even earlier when they're at the okay, so when they brought the other guys first, I also want to say their names. Okay, so we have Tony.
All right.
Okay, which is hilarious. Tony, who's the guy who challenged him to a race in the first part, which turns out to be his best friend. So you have Tony, you have Al, who's the comedy guy, and then you have Mooch.
These sound like an Italian-American gang.
Well, the rest
we got Tony, Al, and the Mooch.
Tony, Al, and Mooch, and like they're clearly Italian people, I guess. But like Mooch is like.
That's such a 50s thing.
It is. So Mooch is like kind of the tough guy, but he's like not really that tough because you don't really see it, but he looks like the tough guy of the group, right? Tony's the leader, Al is the funny guy. That's just how their little trio is.
Okay.
And Steve is like this, oh, you're too serious, Steve. You got to come with us. Go see the spooky show. And he's like, yeah, even though like 5 minutes earlier he challenged him to a race backwards. So like, what
are we doing?
Like, I know their character ideals are just kind of all over the place in some form because they need to fit them for a certain scene, I think. But in any case, they find those 3, and this time 2 of them are like, or I think they find another couple too. They join. I don't even know their names, but they find their cheerleader person and their other pretty girl person, and then like Alan Mooch, and they bring them all with Tony, and they bring them all there, and they're like, okay, we need to spread out, and we need to look for the blob. We need to look for this creature. and we got to warn people or whatever. And so they start warning people. One funny scene has them go to this house, and they go in there, and these, I think it's like a swingers party. Like, I don't know how to explain it, but he like opens the door, like, hey, it's this kid and all this stuff. Who's this kid? Because they're drunk. They're totally drunk. He's like, oh, we're here to warn you about this thing. He's like, oh, this kid is warning us about the Brits are coming. Look at Red. Like, it's such a dated reference. Like, they're talking about Paul Revere? What is his name? The guy who warned them about the British.
Oh, Jesus, I don't know.
Paul Rainier or whatever his name is. But he's like, look, it's Rainier and his wife, Mrs. Rainier. And like, that's their joke.
Damn, that's a dated reference.
And he's like, oh, okay, we're gonna. So he's like, oh, whatever, and he leaves. And they're like, ha ha ha, and then goes to the door because they're trying to warn people, but they just don't care. They're just drinking. That party never comes back. Another useless scene.
I kind of like that, and I also love the dated reference.
So
who did warn the Americans? This is the problem about being Canadian and then trying to like
Paul Revere, I think his name is. Maybe that's what it is. Paul Revere. And he says. Like, yeah, he says, oh, look, it's Mr. Revere and his wife, Mrs. Revere, here to warn us about...
Oh, yeah. British are coming. You got it. Nice.
Yeah.
Nice education, Anthony.
Right? I know a little bit of American history.
I probably know more American history than Canadian.
That's the sad thing about us, right? Mm-hmm. We probably know that more. But in any case, they do this whole thing, and so they all get together afterwards, and then they're going to like, okay, we need to warn everybody about the blob in some form, and this is how we're going to do it kind of thing. And... that's basically it. So that's where I'll stop. So here you are with yours. What happens next?
I mean, like, you have the blob is suddenly at large now. Because, the kind of off-screen sheriff gets killed, too.
Oh, okay.
So we lose Fran and the sheriff, who are some big characters in this.
Oh, so like the main character sheriff is gone, too. Oh, gone. Wow. Okay.
And, no one's safe, like I said, in this movie. And so the blob gets into the sewer system as well. I think that's actually how it got into the sink in the beginning, but
that makes sense.
The terrifying thing about the blob is it changes. It's a shapeshifter, and
or it just
doesn't take the form of anything.
It's water. Whatever it is.
Be like water.
Basically, yes. It could be flat. It can be large,
and it can get to any space.
It can go anywhere. Yeah,
but
it just gets everywhere.
Sort of a hinting was that it hid in the freezer, and it didn't pursue them.
Yes,
and there's hints throughout all of the movie towards this. Where in the beginning the mechanics are fixing up snow machines because they're anticipating a really like a really big snow season because they're in a ski part of the town.
Okay, sure.
Well, I think this was filmed in Louisiana, so I'm like
mountains.
Swamps?
I don't know.
Are we freezing the swamps?
Maybe it was just a bad year.
I don't know.
We're prepared for snow, but there's never snow.
But they have a snow machine anyways.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't think it was supposed to be staged in Louisiana, but I think it was shot in Louisiana.
Then that makes sense. But there's still swamps in the background, so you're like,
I don't think
this is clearly...
I mean, it looks like Appalachia in it.
Oh,
so,
okay. No, that's good enough. That's good enough.
I'm like, yeah, this looks reasonable.
It's probably northern. Yeah. It's probably Virginia or something, which does have snow.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
Again, I don't know much about America.
It does. I do know that area definitely has like mountains and snow and forests and all this kind of stuff. So you could chalk it up to that. But
yes.
We'll say. Yeah. All right.
But then like somebody's playing with a snow globe at another part. And so like there's like these little inklings of things that happen. And this is also where you get the crazy priest who comes and like finds like a crystallized piece of the blob.
Ah, okay.
And he puts it in a mason jar and takes it with him.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I like that.
So he's like this background.
The priest does that.
Yeah. And he's kind of thinking end times.
Sure. Yeah. Right. Who wouldn't, right? In this time.
And this is the point where you sort of get a splitting of the ways, and this is where you have the people who trust the government and the person who doesn't, who is Flag. And because they go back to find the origin point of where the blob came in. So because he saw he's one of the ones who saw he's the one who saw the meteor land, so he knows where it was.
Okay, right. So it does come from the sky.
It does, yeah.
But it clearly wasn't a meteor. It was probably like some kind of like it shot off from like a base or something.
I mean, this one was a meteor.
Oh, it did.
But it was a satellite.
Ah,
it's a falling satellite,
okay,
right?
Gotcha. Oh, so they had a space station that was doing scientific experiments.
It's kind of like shaped like Sputnik, right? Where it's like kind of a dish, and then it's like the meteorite or like the rock. It's like it looks like a rock that splits open, kind of like an egg.
Yeah. So we have that too.
And then underneath it, you have like the sort of a half bowl with an American flag on it.
Oh.
so that sort of what gives
kind of gives it away that it's an American product.
So, and this is where you get all of the people in like the hazmat suits who are setting up their base. I mean, Stranger Things borrows a lot from this.
I was gonna say like this does. Yeah. Well, I mean, Stranger Things sounds a lot like all these other films or whatever.
I think that Stranger Things
definitely
like took a lot from this film and like pulled it because this does take
definitely from the 80s era, right?
Because it takes all of the tropes that were done really well.
Yeah.
And it like I think Stranger Things is excellent.
Yeah, absolutely. Not the third season, but yeah, most of it is very good. Yes. Yeah.
So but what it does take from this is this is the essence that they distilled. Sure. Where they take it and you have the hazmat suit guys and they're the ones who are like everyone in this town is now expendable. Is essentially their idea. So this is where Flag escapes from the back because he's still got the ratchet that he borrowed from earlier. So he gets breaks out of the quarantine van that they put them in.
Sure.
So he escapes to come back later to rescue Shawnee Smith.
Shawnee, right. Okay. Shawnee the cheerleader.
Shawnee the cheerleader.
Okay.
And
interesting.
And so you can see there's just a different feel to this movie where it's not wholesome, where it's there's distrust of the government. Sure. The government's up to nefarious things, but
for good reason
about it. Yeah,
right, for good reason.
Because the government has been up to
government has always been up to nefarious.
The American government has had their hands in some things.
They have definitely done so. And then the ones who were like, well, they are government, so we should respect them. And then you have Flag is like, nah, the system, right? Whatever, right? Like those types of people. I would say, going to this then. So that's interesting. As you say, they split up and they all do their own thing, right? Yeah. So as I said, that one couple who went to that party.
Yeah. Well, and Shawnee goes to save her brothers who were at the movie.
Oh, okay. So, not Shawnee. Jane does have a younger brother in this film, who I say is probably one of the worst parts of it because he's just the most annoying sounding kid. There's horrible, poor child actor. Yeah. I'd say at the time.
Did you watch The Babadook?
I did watch The Babadook. That kid is also annoying, but I would say this one's worse, just because I feel like he didn't know his lines, so he's just kind of looking off screen or off where he's supposed to.
Line?
He looks. I'll say this, and I mean no disrespect. He looks a little mentally handicapped. We'll say, just not really all there. Maybe that was the point of the character. I don't know, but. He just, because of how he comes across, I don't know what to do.
Spikes the camera. Okay.
It's just, he looks back at his sister and then looks off to, kind of read his line. I think that's kind of what was going on, maybe.
I think child acting was rougher then, and you probably didn't look like you were all together there mentally.
Yeah, and the kid may have been kind of off. I don't know. It was very strange.
There was a couple movies that were like that. Yeah. What was the other one I watched? The Stuff?
Okay.
We'll have to watch The Stuff because that one is an experience.
God, I don't want to watch child actors.
No, it's not about. It's just there's just a brief moment where it's somebody just is spiking the camera so hard.
Oh, they're just I see.
You're like, they didn't have enough money to reshoot that.
It's we'll get an editing. No.
Cut it in post. Leave it in.
Leave it in. It's the audience won't know. Oh, the audience knows.
It's hard not to. She's staring at us right through our souls.
Exactly. It's ooh. Anyway, everybody's going and doing their own thing. So we have Steve and Jane. So Steve's dad owns the one convenience store in the town. And they found so the old man had a dog.
Yeah.
I don't know if I mentioned the old man.
Hey, my guy had a dog too.
Had a dog as well? Okay. So this dog gets the dog actually is safe for most of the film, if not all the film, but he just disappears later. But the dog is at the convenience store. So they go over to the dog to try and pick him up and take him home or whatever. But as they walk by, the convenience store door opens because they have the automatic opening. He's like, well, that's strange. The cleaner usually shuts it down by 10. It's it's way too late for him to be here. So obviously the blob is somewhere nearby because it's eating the cleaner. So they go into the convenience store because Steve knows it because it's his dad's. They walk through there, and then this is where we get the blob attacking them. They hide in the deep freeze of this place, and that's when you get the hint of the blob goes under the door, and it goes away.
Doesn't like the cold.
Doesn't like the cold. So similar situation. Very similar.
Safe in Canada.
Even for zombies. We're totally safe.
Above the frost line.
Yep. Only vampires.
Only
vampires. So they love cold and they love dark.
Damn it.
Yeah. But really, really northern Canada. But borderline, we're okay. But this is the key. So that when they get out and they're oh, but he doesn't figure this out yet. They just oh, he's gone. I don't know what happened to him. And then they found the dog Or sorry, they leave, and then their friends meet up with them outside the convenience store, and they're like, "Oh, the dog is fine. We saw him run over there, and we never see the dog again." So the dog is fine. It just ran off screen, and they're like, "Okay, our cleaner is now dead. We now need to wake up the town."
So like these movies compare really well together, and obviously one takes from the other. So it is a faithful remake in that sense.
Yeah, I'd say yeah.
And you get the cultural impact changes, which is really interesting.
This is, like I said, 30 years.
And I think that there's the same defeat of the Blob in the end, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, right. So which one of your characters figures out cold is an issue for the Blob?
Shawnee Smith.
Shawnee Smith.
Her character.
So it's Steve for us. Steve Andrews for us. So for my Blob. So because Steve was there with Jane when the Blob didn't go into the deep freeze. And then this is when they go into their diner, and they're with the Italian family, or the Italian owner who owns it or whatever, and the Blob encircles their diner.
Yeah.
And everybody knows about it now because everybody's been woken up because they were honking horns and everything throughout the whole thing. And the police and the fire and everybody, and they're not panicking, but they're like, okay, we got to do this. Bring guns, bring like whatever we can and bring this thing down. But just nothing does, right? So the Blob is starting to get into their diner. And so they got the phone call to outside, okay, hide in the cellar. We're going to try and like do something to get it off or something. And they use a power line. They cut a power line to try and electrocute it.
Clever.
But it doesn't work. And this is where the war veteran guy kind of comes in handy because he has actual skills with a rifle.
Yeah.
So he's the one that shoots the power line to come down and electrocute it. So it's okay. But unfortunately it doesn't do anything. It also cuts the power to their building. So they're in the darkness. But they're hiding in the cellar. And I think they have like a fire extinguisher, and they use the fire extinguisher against it because he's trying to put out the fire, and then the Blob is there, and the Blob is like, he's like, oh, he doesn't like CO2, he doesn't like cold. Oh, okay, and then they start doing it, and then they are able to get a message out to the others, and like, okay, all the fire departments and all the Jane's dad is the principal of the school, the high school, so he has a bunch of those other like their friends break into the school because it's after hours, grab all the fire extinguishers, and then they basically freeze it. My one ends. Cool. Funny enough, Dave, the police officer, has called the government. He's like, okay, you need to get rid of the Blob here. We've frozen it, and it needs to be in a cold environment. Drop it off in the Arctic or something. The last scene is literally a parachute with the Blob lands in the middle of like an ice scape area, and then it says the end, and then it turns into a question mark.
Okay.
That's how mine ends. Yeah.
I get a lot of
hour and 20 minutes.
That's a tight hour and 20 without the race and the chess.
And the old woman. And the child thing. But yeah.
Mine is, I would say, a very tight 130.
Okay.
130, 134-ish.
Right.
And so...
Yeah. How's yours end here?
It has there's two big scenes with the Blob where you get like the Blob in all its glory.
Right.
You get the Blob
massive,
in this,
isn't it?
Yeah, you get the Blob in the sewer system first, where you have everybody trying to escape.
Okay.
So you have our main characters, and then you have one of the hazmat guys who's trying to escape too. And this is where like nobody's safe because one of the kids gets killed too. We have a kid death in this one.
Oh my god, really?
Yeah, and it's like gruesome kid death because he gets lost in the waters and then gets pushed back up and he's all melting. So it's like the kid's brother who brought him to the movie. And then you have them try and escape out through the sewer system.
Sure. And
then the main hazmat guy is like, no, don't let them. And he covers it and leaves his man under. And they drive a van over top of it and park it. So they're like just down there. And so underneath the Blob is like turning into like this huge mouth that's like ready to devour them. And then Flags takes like one of the explosives from... I think it's like he's got like a full-on bazooka. And he like points it straight up and he's just like, eat this, and fires it up through the sewer system, blows up the van, and then they all escape up through the sewer system.
Jeez, wow.
And
got some action in there too.
Oh yeah, you got some good action in this one. And then it's basically toe-to-toe with the Blob for the rest of it. Because you also get the movie theater scene before this, right?
Yes.
It's just a movie theater massacre.
Sorry.
There's a bloodbath.
I was just going to say, I had that too. I totally forgot. That's how, the theater that those kids were in beforehand, before they left, just so happened to be, the Blob was there after eating the old man, because that's where he escaped after the cold time. And then he ate like a whole bunch, and that's what checked everybody to be like, oh, there is a monster. Yeah. And that's when the police believe him, and all the people are like, oh my god, like what's going on? And that's when the diner gets...
And that's also like when you get the size of the Blob too, because it's devoured everybody, now it's big.
Yes. So ours covers a diner. but you don't really get to see much else, unfortunately. It doesn't look great, I will say. Yeah.
Ours, I like what they've done with ours. Good. Because like even then it's like once it like escapes the sewer, because like you don't have an idea of how big it was when it was in the sewer, and then it comes out, and then it's like going down the street just like stamping on people and just like sucking them up and like taking them all. It's great.
Oh jeez.
Yeah, great.
That sounds great.
And then I think Shawnee Smith's character ends up like freezing it with a fire extinguisher just incidentally, and then they realize they can freeze it with
also a fire extinguisher.
Flag goes to get the snow what do you call them, the snow machines,
right?
Because for the ski hills.
So they're just trying to make more snow for their ski hills.
Exactly.
Okay,
which is normal. We have those here.
Yeah, we do.
And so he gets like a truck and it's like full of liquid nitrogen.
Yeah,
and that's how they destroy it.
So they actually do destroy it.
Well, they turn it into crystals.
And then the blob is like frozen. Like there's no coming back from that.
No, there is.
Okay, so you do have that.
So remember the priest?
Yeah. Oh right, because he has a piece.
Yeah, he has a piece of it. Okay. And then the ending of the movie is him in a field in like a revival tent preaching end times. And then like he's been burned in the incident too. So he's like got long hair and he's all burned. And he's just like, Jesus. End times are coming. And he's just like, as soon as I have a sign from God. And it's like the little blob.
Interesting.
Yeah, so very, very different.
Very, very different. Yeah. Well,
but also
both leave open for
open-ended.
Something could happen.
Yeah.
But I feel like mine is like much less likely.
Yes. Mine seems inevitable.
Yeah. Interesting. Was there ever a sequel to your Blob? I don't know. I don't think there was. I do remember seeing a film that said The Blob Returns.
I think could. I mean, that Blob should come back.
Incredible.
I mean, it's 1988. Do we have? Not too sure.
There's a sequel at the bottom.
References bibliography.
Nope, guess not. There you go. Nope. No sequel.
Paul Revere.
Back to Paul Revere.
Let's see if it
the British are coming.
Again.
The British are coming.
The Blob sequel. Let's see if we can find this.
Yeah.
The Blob 2. Beware the Blob.
Beware the Blob, which was
1958. Okay.
That was 58?
Did they make the Blob 2? Oh. The Blob also known as 1972.
1972. So after mine.
So there's another one in there too.
So there's one in between us. Okay. Interesting. So
are they remaking the Blob?
So there was a sequel or something in between. Okay.
Interesting. Beware the Blob is a sequel to your film. And it was in 1972.
Oh shit! Oh, like 20 years later or 15 years later.
And then we have one in 1988.
And it does not have any, as far as I can remember, nobody from the original cast.
Yeah. Was it received well? I can't imagine it was because I've never heard of it.
Yeah, probably.
Let's look at the reception here.
Sure.
Not that. There. Yeah.
Late tonight, hippie dumb overall. There's some tension and some nods to the predecessor.
I feel like this one actually does a lot of I feel like 1988 does a really good job of actually acknowledging where it came from.
Right.
And what do you think of the Blob overall as a concept?
You know what? If you ask people now, including me, if you ask people do you think a giant gelatinous blob that eats people is scary? I would be like, no, probably not. But when you watch these films, I mean, if you're in that actual position and there's nothing that can stop it.
Yeah.
It can.
Yeah, it's hard to stop it.
It basically just corners you in a room and just eats you. You're trapped, right? Which is the worst type of fear, right?
And it melts you and it digests
you. Yeah, it's a suffering death too, right? And honestly, if you leave the blob to its own devices, the final form of that is basically that it absorbs the entire world.
Yeah.
And becomes the world essentially, right?
Ours is the one in my movie is supposed to be a bacteria that they were experimenting with. They're gonna just dump it on Russia or something.
Oh, okay, yeah, makes sense. Mine was just an alien. Okay. So whatever the case, whether or not it had evil intent, is up for debate. But considering that it just basically absorbs everything, whatever shot it that way, is probably just trying to get rid of it in itself, right?
So I would find that. I think it's scary and I think it's simple. That's what makes it effective.
Right. I think the concept definitely has a lot more potential for horror.
I think when you think of The Thing, though, you think of a more refined version of this idea. Mm-hmm. Where it can take...
Well, that's the true shape-shifting.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
So it is sort of like the Blob in that it is formless, and it has its form in the end.
Yeah.
And it's quite gruesome too, but I think that it's more scary because it can become a person.
Yes. Well, I was going to say even for Stephen King's It too, right?
Yeah.
Like it can also be like your worst fear,
yeah.
right? And also a shapeshifter. But even the Blob is basically just a blob. So I guess everybody knows what the enemy is.
Yeah.
So
I'm fighting acidic putty.
Basically, right? It's just this thing.
It's trying to kill me.
Well, to plug the other one in as well. So like you were recently on my Shiny Metal Cast podcast, right, with Mitchell.
Yeah.
And so like when we were talking about this stuff in the Futurama universe, there is also I believe it's called the gelatinous blob.
Okay.
And he's based off of said blob monster, right? Sci-fi monster. And he literally just takes people and puts them into his belly, and then they just basically get
Treehouse of Horror does it too.
Right. Oh yeah, with Homer, right?
Yeah.
Homer is the gelatinous blob. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And then Dr. Phil has to have an intervention with him.
There you go.
Homer, don't sell me an outhouse. Tell me it's the Taj Mahal.
I forgot about that. That's great. That's right. Yeah, Homer is the blob because he eats the blob and becomes the blob. Right. Sorry. That's great. We gotta watch that again. Actually, compare it to these.
Yeah, because it's Treehouse of Horror does some really great.
There's some really good parodies.
There's some great parodies.
There's some really good parodies.
I still like Tron the most. That's such a strange.
The 3D one or whatever. Yeah.
That's probably my favorite.
That's probably one of the best ones.
Did anybody see the movie Tron? No.
What? Yeah. No.
No.
This is a cube. Whoa. Easy there, Poindexter.
This is a square. Now if I extend the cube.
Whoa. That's great.
This was classic horror, though.
It is classic horror, and I can see what you're talking about when you said beforehand that this is kind of like where a lot of horror films will get some influence.
Yeah, I think,
and especially from the 1950s one. I think there's a lot of really good like themes that are just carried over. Like how many films had like the two teenagers in the woods and they're looking at the stars in the middle of the night and a horror thing happens.
Yeah.
How many like we get trapped in a diner and this happens with us, or we're going to a diner, or the sheriff or the police officers or whatever.
It sounds exactly like a story that H.P. Lovecraft would tell in a bar.
Absolutely. You know what? That was my first thought. Was like, this seems like an H.P. Lovecraft type of.
It's very horror. Lovecraftian.
Yeah. Well, especially for mine.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, especially for yours.
Yours is definitely like experimentation, government interference, and like.
Yeah, I think that's the interesting thing is when you do get those remakes and you get to see what changed over time, because I think that for better or for worse, people will complain about politicization of art, and you're always going to see political influence, and you're like, what's culture and what's we're being a little too political here.
Sure.
This one was cultural.
Yeah.
And like the cultural influence and the change that you see in America become like it manifests itself in this film when you compare the two, which is just interesting.
That is it, and it's incredible to hear that too, because you're like even looking at this movie from my eyes, just be like, wow, it's strange that nobody here is bad.
Yeah.
It's strange that there is no actual bad person.
Some just some Leave It to Beaver stuff.
Basically, yeah. It's a very much like this town will do anything for each other. Everybody trusts each other. There's nothing. The police will be like, oh, you were doing something wrong. Don't do that again. Bad you, and then take it away. Versus yours, like
everybody's like
flag you asshole kid and all this stuff.
You see such a different like separation of everybody, and everybody's got their
cliques and their groups and
so interesting.
So it is interesting, but this is a good idea to watch the Blob. Yeah,
this is a unique one.
So I would say, you would say you'd recommend yours.
100%.
What do you rate yours out of 10? Would you say overall?
I think that this is an 80s film. I think this is an 8 because and here's why, because you still have to judge a movie by how effective it is overall.
Yeah.
Right, and I think that they executed this idea to the fullest extent that they could have.
Yeah.
But I just think that the concept falls short. Versus something like The Thing for me is like a 10.
Sure.
Because it executes exactly what it meant to.
Yeah.
It's creepy, and the tension of the movie it's everything.
Yeah.
And so it's like The Blob is like one step short of that. And so I would say that it's missing those elements of like true terror and tension. Oh, and it's like it's kind of a little bit silly, so it's fun.
Right.
Like I love it.
So which kind of makes it's supposed to do that in some form, right? Okay. So you're saying just shy of like being like just as good as The Thing. But if it just gone that little further to be like the horror that
I think the thing takes itself seriously. Like it plays
right. Okay.
Because it's John Carpenter and he's all in.
Yeah.
And so and the music too in the thing and the music, the tension, and even like the practical effects in the thing are just more believable. And it has some really tense scenes, like the shock paddles into the chest.
Right.
And like the dog scenes. There's just more.
Does the dog get eaten in yours?
In the thing?
In your Blob?
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't. Okay.
It escapes.
Nice.
I know.
Okay.
I mean, it runs off pretty quick. It's like,
Yeah, it's nice when the dog gets out.
Yeah, we like it when the dog escapes.
Yeah. Okay. Overall, from mine, I would say this Blob is probably I'm gonna give it a solid 6.
Okay.
I would push it to 6.5 or 7 because I think the movie is actually very well done. But times have changed. The acting is okay. The graphics are great. Okay. Scenes are great. The story is actually pretty good.
So on both of them, they nail the practical effects.
Absolutely. The only issue is like there are scenes in this movie that honestly are useless. They are useless.
I really want to watch these scenes, like just to see.
You definitely can. It's just they're not useful for the plot, and they don't do anything. Maybe they add a little bit with the characters, but even then, they're not. It doesn't have anything that holds anything with the characters in the future.
I wish my characters had the nicknames.
Right.
I wish we had the Mooch. They should have brought Mooch back.
They should have one guy named Mooch.
And Tony, Mooch.
And he actually doesn't mooch. He's just the tough guy, I think. Yeah, he's just the tough stereotype 50s guy.
Tough guy Mooch.
Tough guy Mooch. And Al the funny guy. Yeah, that's all it is. So
Al chuckles.
So these guys, this film, overall, solid film. It's just like, for the time, very, very good. And just acting could be desired. Scenes could be cut. But overall, Blob is itself, and when you get to the Blob story, the storyline with the Blob is intent is very good. So I'd say 6.5 maybe 6.5. I'll go.
So this is a solid watch for 2 movies, double feature.
Do it.
And I think we'll have to get back to watching some of these older ones too, because they're like instrumental in how you see the whole genre too.
Absolutely,
which is fun. So maybe we'll switch and we'll watch the reverse Blobs.
Yeah. We might have to. Yeah, we should. Then we'll compare.
All right. Well, thanks for watching again, guys, and thanks for tuning in and watching some of the shorts too. My name is Oliver.
And I'm Anthony.
And remember, guys, you have nothing to fear but fear itself.
And Mooch.
Mooch.